Geç oraya! Oğul, etme bana acı.
Imagine a son who takes his own flesh and blood, the father who sacrificed his own sustenance to feed him and his own comfort to clothe him, the man who handed over the vast fortune and the sprawling estate he built from the ground up with his bare hands, simply because a veil fell over his eyes, simply because his hands trembled with age and he spilled his food. He cast him out at the whim of his venomous-tongued wife, locking him away in that filthy, dark stable where the livestock are tethered, bowing to the arrogance of that stone-hearted daughter-in-law who claimed he reeks, he embarrasses her before her high society guests, and there is no room for a blind old man in her luxury home. He abandoned that mighty plane tree to die on a handful of straw amidst the cattle and the sheep. Prepare yourselves for an epic tale that will chill your blood, making you cry out that the Lord should turn you to stone rather than give you such a child, as it reveals the bitterest price of arrogance and ruthlessness. Dear listeners, before we begin this cautionary tale that will ache your hearts, illustrating how arrogance, filial ingratitude, and the unerring scales of divine justice manifest, please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like our video, and share your beautiful and precious comments with us. Furthermore, we express our eternal gratitude to those loyal, kind-hearted friends who support our channel through the join button and help sustain this caravan of kindness by sending super thanks. With your invaluable support, we continue to spread these cautionary parables from ear to ear, telling how divine justice, sooner or later, always prevails. Now, if you have your tea ready, lean back, for what you are about to hear is the most striking proof of how mercy turns into a grand miracle, while arrogance transforms into an irreversible catastrophe. In the fertile lands of Anatolia, where every shade of green blends into one another, amidst the vast, endless fields, Uncle Kadir was one of the wealthiest and most respected men of that great town.
In his youth, he had carried stones on his back in wicker baskets, clawing at the earth with his calloused hands. Through honest labor, he had built that massive farm and those sprawling orchards all by himself. After laying his wife to rest at a young age, he dedicated his life solely to his two sons, his eldest, Riza, and his youngest, Kerem. Vowing that his children would never feel the sting of being motherless or ever have to bow their heads to anyone, he sacrificed his own needs to provide for theirs, going without so they could have plenty. Yet even two trees drinking from the same spring do not bear the same fruit. Despite being raised with his father's integrity, the eldest son, Riza, was a man whose heart had been darkened by worldly possessions, insatiable greed, and pride. He placed money, power, and status above all else. His arrogance reached new heights after he married Shermin, the daughter of one of the town's wealthiest and most snobbish families. Shermin was a poison-tongued woman who viewed those around her as mere insects. She cared for nothing but her designer clothes and gold, devoid of even a shred of compassion. The younger son, Kerem, was the polar opposite of his brother. He had inherited his father's heart of gold and his deep compassion. He was a gentle soul who feared hurting even an ant, always keeping his head bowed in modesty, with no desire for worldly wealth. Kerem had married Zainab, an unassuming woman from the outskirts of town, who was raised with the same integrity and possessed a heart as pure as a diamond. Far from the opulence of the family farm, he lived peacefully in a modest two-room shanty, subsisting solely on his own labor. The years had begun to turn their relentless and swift gears for Uncle Kadir as well.
That mighty plane tree, that man like a mountain, had grown old, his back bent with age. And most painful of all, due to a severe illness, a relentless veil had fallen over both his eyes, leaving him completely blind. He no longer possessed the strength to manage that vast estate or tend to those fields. Seizing upon his father's helplessness and his descent into darkness, his eldest son, Riza, immediately set his sinister plan into motion. One morning, he approached his father's bedside with a thick stack of documents prepared by lawyers. "Father," he said, in a voice dripping with false and insidious affection. "You have grown old, and your eyes can no longer see. The management of this great farm, of all these assets, is a heavy burden. Allow me, as your eldest son, to take this weight off your shoulders. Simply sign these papers, transfer all power of attorney and all deeds to me, so that the business may continue without interruption. You shall live like a king in this grand mansion, and we will care for you as our own until the day you die." Uncle Kadir, with his pure and innocent heart, could never have imagined that his own flesh and blood would be capable of such a monumental betrayal. "Very well, my son," he said with trembling hands. "The wealth is yours, the property is yours. Just ensure you respect your brother Kerem's rights. Do not leave him in need." And with those trembling fingers, unable to see a thing, he transferred his entire vast fortune, the deeds to the farm to which he had dedicated his life, to his eldest son, Riza, with a single signature. It was then, immediately after those signatures were dry and the deeds were locked in Riza's safe, that everything changed. Uncle Kadir's presence in that grand mansion, in his sightless state, began to grate on his daughter-in-law, Sharmeen. To her, he had become nothing more than a heavy burden.
During dinner, as they sat beneath those antique tables and crystal chandeliers, when the blind Uncle Kadir's hand trembled and a single drop of soup fell onto that luxurious tablecloth, Sharmeen grimaced and began to hiss with her venomous tongue. "Riza!" she shouted, slamming her silver spoon onto the table. "Must I endure the filth of this blind man? He already reeks of old age and medicine. When my high society guests visit this mansion in the coming days, how am I supposed to present this man to them? I am being humiliated because of your father. What place does he have amidst such nobility? Am I a servant in this house?" When Uncle Kadir heard his daughter-in-law's cruel, loathsome words, a heavy lump formed in his throat. He could not swallow. The spoon in his hand trembled and fell to the floor. He bowed his head, and 2 tears trickled from his sightless eyes. He expected his own son, Riza, to stand up for him, to shout at his wife, "How dare you speak to my father like that?" Yet Riza, a man who worshipped money and his wife, a man who had locked his conscience in his wallet alongside his property deeds, agreed with her. "You are right, my dear," Riza said, with utter coldness and lack of mercy. "He cannot see anyway. He is becoming a burden in this vast house. We must find him another place." The following morning, in those early hours when the sun failed to warm the freezing air, hours that chilled one to the bone, Riza entered his father's room. Grabbing Uncle Kadir by the arm, he said, "Father, get up, we are leaving." Uncle Kadir rose in bewilderment. Uncle Kadir asked hopefully, "Where to, my son? Are you taking me to my Kerem?" Riza did not answer. Silently, he led his father through the dark corridors and toward the door.
He took him from his warm bed, from that mansion, and dragged him toward the dilapidated stable at the far corner of the farm, a place unused for years, reeking of animal waste and straw, with a leaking roof and a bone-chilling cold. He opened the heavy, creaking wooden door and ruthlessly set his father down on a makeshift rotted straw bed, right beside where the animals were tethered in that dark, manure-scented void. "This is your place from now on, father," Riza said, his voice devoid of even the slightest tremor. "You are disturbing Sharmeen's peace at home. You are blind anyway. It matters not whether you sleep in that room or here. The workers will place 1 meal a day before you. Keep your voice down, and do not disgrace us in the eyes of others." Uncle Kadir could not believe his ears. In that darkness, as his hands felt the cold stone walls, the straw and the breath of the cattle, his world crumbled. His own flesh and blood, the very Riza for whom he had spent his life, had discarded him in this stable among the beasts like a piece of refuse. "My son," he said, his voice trembling and tearful, "my son, do not do this. I am your father. Do not leave me in this cold, this filth. I will sit silently in a corner of that room. I swear I will not make a sound. Please, my son." But Riza, with a heart turned to stone, did not even hear his father's cry. He locked the heavy wooden door upon his father with a resounding thud, and returned to his warm, luxurious mansion and his wife, without a single pang of conscience.
Uncle Kadir was left utterly alone in that dark, freezing stable, amidst the lowing of the animals. He pulled his knees to his chest and began to sob in desperation. "My God," he said, lifting his sightless eyes toward the heavens.
Grant guidance to the child who has caused me this pain, and deliver me from this darkness, this ignominy, by taking my soul." Weeks passed. Uncle Kadir was struggling to survive in that stable, amidst that filth. He continued to subsist on the ice-cold, stale scraps thrown before him. He was wasting away day by day, his bones becoming visible. Reza and Sharmin, meanwhile, were hosting banquets in that grand mansion, squandering their father's fortune amidst bursts of laughter. But the villagers' tongues could not be silenced. The consciences of the farmhands were heavy, and word of this cruelty began to spread in whispers through the coffee houses of the town square. "Have you heard? That great Rizaa has locked his own father in the stable where the cattle are tethered. The poor man, blind as he is perishing in that filth, and that devil of a woman, Sharmin, refuses to let him into the mansion." These whispers eventually reached the ears of the honorable younger son, Kerem, at the town market one day. Kerem could not believe what he heard. He was struck as if by a bolt of lightning. He hurled the crates of fruit in his hands to the ground. His eyes welled with tears, his breath caught in his throat. "My father, my mighty oak," he cried, as he threw himself into his old pickup truck and sped away. Leaving a trail of dust behind him, he arrived at the gates of the vast estate. Kerem stepped out of the vehicle with such fury that even the guards at the mansion gate did not dare stand in his way. He did not head for the mansion, but ran straight toward the old stable at the back, just as the villagers had described. He smashed the lock on the stable door with a large stone from the ground, striking it repeatedly until his hands bled. When he forced the door open, he pushed through the heavy stench of manure and the biting, freezing cold. There, shivering on a handful of straw in the corner, he saw his father, disheveled and broken. "Father!"
Kerem cried out, falling to his knees. He clung to his father's ice-cold, trembling hands and stained cheeks, overcome with sobs. "Father, my dear father, how could they do this to you? How could they cast you into this hell?" As Kadir felt his young son's warm voice and tears upon his face, a torrent of grief poured from his sightless eyes. "Kerem, my son, you have come," he whispered in a weak, frail voice, embracing his son tightly. At that moment, his arrogant brother Reza and his venomous wife Sharmin appeared at the stable door. Reza stood with his hands in his pockets, staring insolently at the scene without a shred of shame. Kerem gently lowered his father to the ground and rose, roaring at his brother like a lion. "What kind of monster are you?" Kerem cried out, his voice echoing across the entire farm. "How could your conscience allow you to cast your own father, whose vast fortune and lands you usurped, into the stable among the beasts? It is not blood that flows through your veins, Reza, but the devil's poison. Have you no fear of God?" Sharmin interjected with a mocking sneer. If you are so concerned, take your foul-smelling blind father to your own home, Kerem. There is no place for someone like him in our luxury within this mansion. He was a disgrace to us before the world." Reza roared in agreement. "Listen to me, Kerem. Take your father and go to hell wherever you please. But get this through your thick skull. From this farm, from my father's assets and wealth, there is not a single penny, not a single cent for either of you. All the titles are in my name. If you are so full of mercy, you can tend to your father in that shack of yours before you even feed yourself. Now get out of my sight."
Kerem looked upon his brother with nothing but pity, confronted by those loathsome money-worshipping words. "Those ill-gotten gains, those riches you usurped, will surely choke you, Reza," he declared in a steady voice. "Continue to worship your wealth. I am taking my father, my gateway to heaven, and I am leaving. Even if my home is but a humble 2-room dwelling, my father shall sit there in the place of honor, like a king." Kerem lifted his father onto his shoulders and carried him out of that stable.
he placed him into his own dilapidated car. He drove to his small shanty on the outskirts of town, a place with a leaking roof that barely held the heat of a single stove. When his wife, Zainab, saw her father-in-law in such a wretched state, she was overcome with tears. Without a moment's hesitation or a trace of disdain, she immediately set the water to boil. Together, they bathed the old man as if he were their own father and dressed him in their cleanest garments. There was no meat in the house, no lavish feasts. There was only a single bowl of hot tarhana soup. Zainab fed the soup to the blind man spoonful by spoonful with her own hands, whispering, "May this bring you health and healing, father." They covered their father with the only thick quilt they owned, while they themselves slept shivering under a thin, worn blanket. Yet they slept with hearts overflowing with peace. Tucked into that warm bed, as Kadir felt the profound compassion of his two children, he raised his hands toward the heavens. "O Lord," he sobbed, "you have illuminated my blind eyes with the mercy of these children. Do not let them fall into hardship. Bless my daughter Zainab and my son Karam in both worlds. And as for Riza, do not take his soul until he has felt the same bitter cold of the stable that I endured." That night, the heartfelt prayer of a father, a plea from the oppressed that makes the heavens tremble, rose through the ceiling of that makeshift shanty and reached the divine presence. Months passed. Despite their poverty, Karam and Zainab continued to care for their father as if he were a newborn, shielding him with the utmost devotion.
Yet the meager minimum wage Karam earned was no longer sufficient to cover both the house rent and his father's expensive medications. He could not sleep at night, struggling with the burden of how to provide his father with a life of comfort. One night, Uncle Kadir heard his son's sorrowful sighs. "My Karam," he called out from the room. Karam rushed to him immediately. "Yes, father? Are you in pain?" he asked. Uncle Kadir sat up in his bed. "My son, come sit beside me," he said. With his hand, he produced a small, rusty key from within the old, tarnished amulet he had worn around his neck for years. He pressed that key firmly into Karam's palm. "My Karam," Uncle Kadir said in a whisper, "your brother Riza stole all my deeds, my vast farm, and my money in the bank through deception. When he cast me into the stable, he thought he had taken everything from me. But what that ambitious dog did not know was that I possessed a secret I had kept from him for years, a legacy left to me by your late grandfather in my youth, which I told to no one. Riza did not even bother to transfer that small, old plot of land on the upper side of the village, the one they call the Stony Ground, where not a single blade of grass grows, into his own name, as he saw it as worthless. He dismissed it as a mere wasteland. Right in the center of that plot, 3 paces from that old withered oak tree, there is a chest I buried beneath the earth. This is the key to that chest. Go, my child, unearth that chest. That chest is the reward for your pure heart and your compassion. It is rightfully yours alone." In astonishment, Karam kissed his father's hand. The next morning, before the sun had even risen, he went to the stony plot his father had described, pickaxe in hand. This was the stony land his brother had disregarded as a dump. He found the withered oak tree. He counted 3 paces and began to dig into the earth. After digging for meters, the tip of the pickaxe struck solid metal. As he cleared the earth with his bare hands, an ancient, heavy, ornate iron chest stood before him. With immense effort, Karam hauled the chest out of the pit. He inserted the rusty key his father had given him into the lock and turned it. As the heavy lid creaked open, Karam's eyes widened in disbelief. His knees buckled, and he collapsed where he stood. The chest was filled to the brim with priceless antique gold coins from the Ottoman era, alongside massive jewels encrusted with rubies and emeralds. This was a fortune so vast that it could have purchased Riza's luxurious mansion 50 times over. Uncle Kadir had kept this secret for years, hiding it from his greedy son, only to bestow it upon the one child who showed him true compassion and filial devotion, a gift serving as an instrument of divine justice. Beholding the gold through a veil of tears, Karam kissed the earth and prostrated himself before God. After discreetly liquidating the treasure, he possessed one of the greatest fortunes in the town, and indeed the entire city.
His first priority was to take his father to the country's most renowned and prestigious hospitals. Following a series of costly surgeries, the veil over Uncle Kadir's blind eyes slowly began to lift. After years of darkness, the father saw the faces of his young son and his compassionate daughter-in-law Zainab once more. He embraced them, overcome with emotion. Kerem purchased a grand mansion for his father in the city's most exquisite location and provided them with the latest luxury vehicles. Life had transformed into a veritable paradise for those compassionate children.
And what of Riza'ah, the man whose hubris led him to claim he had created the very mountains, the man who cast his own father into a stable and told him to rot? And what of his socialite viper of a wife, Sharmin? After seizing all his father's assets, Riza was consumed by an insatiable ambition to grow even greater in his pride, to become the sole ruler of the region. He took out millions in bank loans, borrowed massive sums from loan sharks, and bought up every piece of land and every new farm in the vicinity. He believed himself to be the invincible king of those lands. But could the curse of the oppressed, especially a father's cry rising from that stable, ever go unanswered? The unerring, deafening slap of divine justice would strike just as Riza declared, "I am invincible," descending from that peak with such a catastrophe that he would find no place to hide. That winter, a horrific livestock disease, a relentless plague unlike any seen before in the town, broke out. This plague struck Riza's massive estate, his boasted stables, directly. In just 3 days, yes, in just 3 days, the thousands of cattle in Riza's stables, his multi-million lira fortune, collapsed and perished one by one. His entire herd was wiped out. And it did not end there. When the time came to repay those massive bank loans and debts to loan sharks, he did not have a single penny left. The bank's lawyers and ruthless bailiffs arrived at the gates of that massive mansion with the gendarmerie. In mere seconds, they seized the deeds Riza had fraudulently taken from his father, his luxury cars, and the gold and possessions Sharmin so boasted of. Sharmin, that vanity-stricken woman. The moment she saw her husband's massive bankruptcy, his penniless, miserable state, she ended her sham marriage in an instant. Do you think I am going to live on the streets with an unlucky, penniless man like you?
Damn you! Your father's curse has finally caught up with you. She spat in Riza's face, packed her bags, and left him that very day. She moved on, chasing other wealthy men, the high society. In a single night, Riza, once the most powerful and arrogant landlord of Karayaka, the man who had cast his own father into a stable, had been reduced to a wretched street beggar with nothing but a tattered jacket on his shoulders, without even enough money for a morsel of bread, without a place to sleep, or even a stable to take shelter in. That proud head of his was now bowed low in the muddy streets. For weeks, Riza slept in those cold streets, among the refuse. His breath reeked of hunger, and he trembled violently from the cold. People, well aware of his past cruelty, refused him even a bowl of soup, slamming their doors in his face and saying that no mercy should be shown to the man who threw his father into a stable. One winter day, as the snow fell in thick flakes, Riza was begging on his knees in the mud of the town square. Just then, a long, black, gleaming luxury car of the latest model pulled up in front of him. As the door opened, a wave of warm air struck his face. The man stepping out of the car, wearing the most expensive, heavy overcoat, with a confident and compassionate gaze, was none other than his brother, Kerem. And right beside Kerem, arm in arm, stood his father, Uncle Kadir, dressed elegantly, his eyes now clear and bright, standing with a majestic poise. When Riza lifted his head from the mud and saw his father, the man he had left for dead in a stable, standing like a king, looking straight into his eyes that he thought were blind, he lost his mind. He was utterly thunderstruck. The heavy blow of divine justice struck him across the face at that very moment. In his shame and humiliation, he wished the earth would open up and swallow him whole.
Choking with sobs, crawling through the mud, he threw himself at the clean shoes, the feet of his brother and father. "Father, Kerem, please forgive me," Riza began to wail, thrashing like a madman. I succumbed to the devil. I succumbed to pride. I usurped your rights, Father. I threw you into that stable. I abandoned you to the cold. Look, divine justice turned my vast farm, my fortune, into ashes in a single night. My wife left me. I was kicked out like a dog. I became a beggar. I am freezing in the streets. I am starving to death. Please, Father, spit in my face if you wish, or strike me dead, but please forgive me. Give me a morsel of bread. Let me be a dog at your door. Karam looked at his brother, who was now crawling on the ground, the same man who once told them to get out of his domain, with nothing but pity and an icy expression. Uncle Kadir, however, never broke his upright posture. Only a single tear rolled down from his eyes. Uncle Kadir did not even lean down toward the cruel son groveling at his feet. He spoke only with that heavy voice, a voice that could shake mountains. I have no son who would cast his father into a stable for property, who would deem him worthy of cattle filth, Riza. When you stole those deeds, the light in my eyes had faded, but my heart could see. My only child is my Karam, who honored me in his shanty, who shared his single bowl of soup with me. Our account in the presence of God was settled in the cold of that stable. Now go, and let that pride you trusted so much keep you warm in that mud. Karam gently took his father's arm. Without showing the slightest concern for Riza's wails and pleas, they stepped into their warm car, and they drove away, leaving Riza all alone, choking on his sobs amidst the mud and the snow.
Riza spent the remainder of his life on those streets, amidst the refuse, on the brink of madness, consumed by remorse, and shivering in the winter cold. The once mighty landlord had fallen victim to the chill of the stable and the weight of a father's curse, passing away in those streets, utterly alone and in misery. And so, dear listeners, the arrogance that blinds the eye, that insatiable lust for worldly possessions, it renders a person so blind and so heartless that you would cast your own father, the great plane tree who gave you life and raised, into a stable with your own hands. Yet the scales of divine justice are so precise and its blow so deafening that the grand palaces you built and the wealth you relied upon can crumble upon you in a single second. And then you become a beggar in need of a bowl of soup, a single drop of compassion, yet you find not a single door to take you in. But he who showed mercy, who cared for his father and turned his tiny home into a heaven for him, is rewarded by the grace of God with a miracle rising from beneath the barren stone. May God protect us all from being ungrateful, arrogant, and cold-hearted children who rebel against their parents. May He grant us the wisdom to cherish our elders while they are still with us and to receive their blessings. As we reach the end of this heartbreaking and cautionary tale, we have a request for you, our dear friends. If we have taken a lesson from this parable, please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your loved ones. Remember that through the support you provide via the join button and the super thanks you send, we are able to spread these seeds of kindness and justice to many more people. In the comments section below, we ask, if you were in Karam's place after attaining such great wealth, would you forgive your brother who came to your door as a beggar? We look forward to your answers and your beautiful insights. Until we meet again in new exemplary stories of beauty and righteousness, cherish your elders, and may you all remain in God's keeping.